An Old and Established Name is a short story written by Lao She. It shows a striking contrast between an old traditional society and a new modern society during a changing and competitive time. Now it shows um, the life of a senior apprentice in a store called the Fortune Silk Store as he goes through an old manager to a new manager, back to his old manager, and the story ends with the final fate of the Fortune Silk Store. Told from a perspective of a side character, the focus is not on the change of these people coming in and out of the business, but the focus is on the main character's earnest response to the changes and transformations happening around his life. Lauscher clearly illustrates the value of a person experiencing continuous emotional waves and surviving through difficulties. The Fortune Silk Store was a store of cultured elegance that was simple and honest. And despite Shin De-zhi, the main character's admiration for his old manager, Manager Tian, and his upright demeanor, a new manager, Manager Zhou, must come in to transform operations and services in order to keep the business alive. Manager Zhou tosses away all these old and traditional customs and changes the place into a store just like all the other stores on the street. It functions only to attract customers and make money. Code of ethics no longer applied. And even though Xin De understands that the world is changing and that Manager Zhou has a way of success in this new world, the main character himself cannot condone such deceitful behavior. But he doesn't have to tolerate it any longer because Manager Zhou leaves to work for his competitor instead, and the old manager is brought back. Traditions may be brought back, but business is scarce, and after a year, the Fortune Silk Store is brought out by the Heaven Silk Store. Now, without a doubt, the thoughts and emotions of Xin De makes the story very intriguing. Throughout the whole situation, he never abandons his ideals of maintaining and valuing the traditional culture, morals, and doctrines. Although he cannot refute the fact that Manager Zhou can make the business alive and make a lot of money, he cannot bring himself to fully admire and accept these new ways of doing things. Now, when Manager Tian returns and the store is back to the way that it was, Shin De still stands by the store because he truly loves the good times that the store once had. As sad as it is to witness the demise of his beloved store filled with old values and customs, and while he knew that deep down in his heart that the past cannot be recovered, Shin De held on as long as he could to the shattered bits and pieces of his hope and ideals until the new world took over. An old and established name is a good title, a fitting title for such a story because that is the because the story is about the life of the business, the Fortune Silk Store. A quote from the story. The Fortune Silk Store, an old and established name with years' standing, now demeaned itself into employing every kind of trick to rope in customers. Xinde's mouth hung so far open in dismay that his face began to look like a dumpling that had split apart while boiling. An old hand, an old and established name, old rules, all had vanished along with Manager Tian, perhaps never to return. Manager Tian had been very honest and gentlemanly, so much so, in fact, that the Fortune Silk Store lost money. End quote. The business begins as a store that only functioned on old rules, but as soon as the leave of its old manager, the customs are gone. There is a heavy focus of the practices of Fortune Silk Store in the past to constantly remind the reader that the main character holds very strongly to these ideals. It is repeated that the store is sold based on its old and established name. It didn't need anything else. But because of the external factors from the changes of culture and society, the business cannot carry on to function like it once did. It had to change with the times in order to continue. Everything must change. The arrival of the new manager brings along the needed transformation. The old disappears, and the new takes over. There is no return to the past, as hard as one tries. The life of the Fortune Silk Store embodies the conflict between a traditional culture and the new foreign culture. It implies that there is a struggle between the culture of old China versus the new and incoming influence of Western capitalism. The presence of capitalism in the city and the country brought upon significant cultural change and cultural split in Chinese society in the 1930s. The changes in business operations resulted primarily from the brutal competition and social transformation. There was a huge urge to modernize simply to survive in the city, in the country, and in the world. The demise of the old and established store symbolizes the losing battle of tradition against modernization. No matter how hard tradition fought, it cannot compete with the new, and ultimately it will be overpowered. Honesty and simplicity can no longer guarantee survival. Only facades and deceit can ensure a position in the new world. I would personally recommend Lauscher's An Old and Established Name because of its direct depiction of the struggles and failures of preserving the tradition in a new society, and the clear representation of the conflicting inner turmoil of those helplessly affected by their external environment.